Welcome to HFY Sci-Fi channel. Don't forget to subscribe and explore. Metal coughed as wind dragged it across scorched concrete. A single canister, empty, dented, rolled unevenly toward a trench where weeds had forgotten their own color. Above, a sky the color of old bruises pressed low, swollen with a humidity that never broke into rain. Nothing moved, not willingly. Through the reactor skeleton, heat shimmered against rusted corridors and panels so thin they whined when gusts scraped through. Shadows spilled across corridors like oil, not chasing, not fleeing, just settling into every dent where something had once tried to live. Near a drainage tunnel, two small hands dug at loose gravel. Pale knuckles. No shoes. Tiny fingers pushed away dirt, searching for the little shapes that used to be trinkets when the world still named such things. Beside the hands, another set, slightly smaller, mimicked the motion but slower, distracted by a green insect twitching in the dust. Nothing about them belonged here. Not the soft giggles, not the looseness in their limbs, not the quiet language passed between them in incomplete syllables. They were light in a place built to erase light. A shadow stirred above. Not quick, not stealthy, just worn. One foot pressed flat against a rusted rail tested it. A worn knee followed, easing down next to the children with the kind of movement that carried pain long forgotten by the nervous system. Arms, thin but firm, spread out between the girls and the corridor leading deeper into open terrain. No words. Just the slow settling of presence, like stone accepting gravity. Where walls bent in on themselves, skeletal piping let out a low mechanical sigh. The tunnels exhaled warmth laced with copper and mold. Something in that air pulled a cough from the older child. She turned toward the woman, leaned into her hip, rubbed her cheek against fabric that smelled like welded iron and lavender residue. Past the wreckage field, beyond the husk of what had once been a transport yard, someone leaned against a broken antenna mast. One boot dug shallow grooves into red clay. Arms folded. Eyes behind scavenged lenses tracked motion without betraying intent. Not local. Not curious. Just watching. Not the kind of watching that wants to interfere. Just the kind that doesn't know what else to do. Close by, a metal bird, dead for years, hung from a crossbeam by cable strands hardened like tendon. Beneath it, a faded caution stencil warned of fusion breach. Nobody looked up. Nobody read warnings anymore. The widow stood as the wind changed. Her posture adjusted, weight shifting slightly forward, barely perceptible unless one knew the language of danger. She scanned without turning her head, shoulders remaining level, body never tensing. Behind her, the younger twin whispered something about a dream where the sky had turned green and soft things grew from glass. Scraps in the widow's hand clinked together as she slipped them into her satchel, old thermal coils, a half-melted data badge, wire ends cut too clean to be accidental. These would buy water. Or quiet. Maybe both. Something rattled far off, too rhythmic to be wind, too light to be heavy machinery. It came from the refinery corridor, past the broken gate. Her eyes didn't narrow. Breathing didn't shift. She adjusted the strap on her shoulder and knelt again beside the children, drawing them in close with arms that bore more scar than skin. The man on the hill still watched, unmoving. Far beneath their feet, in sewage tubes warped by seismic shifts, spores moved through water stained with ancient reactor runoff. In that sludge, life fought to remember itself, but slowly. The scavenger clans had not passed through this district in 4 days. That meant hunger was stirring. That meant someone would test the perimeter. Her daughters gathered their little things. A nail shaped like a fish, a copper square still warm from sunlight, and tucked them into pockets sewn from tarp edges. No one spoke about what to do if the perimeter failed. Those kinds of instructions were delivered through tone, not language. One of them looked up. Eyes still too wide for this place. The reactor casing moaned as temperature shifted. A panel clanged to the floor. Dust lifted, then fell. Still, no one moved. Ash scattered like dry pollen as boots crushed brittle plants that hadn't bloomed in years. Not footsteps meant for stealth. These came loud, confident. Laughs in broken dialects cracked through the air like shattered glass, bouncing off metal walls and warning everyone that time had run out for silence. Camp doors slammed shut in the distance. Not from wind. Not from curiosity. Refugees had heard that tone before, laughter without restraint, voices rising without urgency. That was the kind of noise made by people who didn't expect resistance, who didn't need permission. A rust-colored vehicle, barely held together by welds and instinct, ground its way up a slope of broken rebar and settled between two collapsed storage tanks. Its engine hissed in protest. One of them stepped out, bare arms, rusted goggles, no insignia. His fingers curled around a weapon built from pipe casings and bone handles. The others fanned out, not searching, but claiming. Children disappeared behind tarp curtains. Traders ducked into shipping crates. One woman stacked empty bottles and made herself smaller by pretending she wasn't there. Nobody screamed. Screaming was expensive. Between wreckage piles near the reactor edge, two little bodies crouched behind a rusted beam. One cradled her toy, the other pointed at something scuttling beneath a cracked panel. Neither had seen the vehicle. Neither had heard the laughter. Their world, for one brief moment, remained unbroken. A shift in air. Boots grinding stone. A whirring click followed by silence too deep for chance. One scavenger raised his arm. Barrel settled. Sight lined up. The launcher made no sound when primed, just a cold breath of air and the stillness of intent. A blur broke into view. Not fast. Not graceful. Just committed. Arms extended wide, frame stretched thin from months of starvation and refusal. No shield. No cry. Just motion between daughters and death. Impact didn't sound like it should. No explosion. No roar. Just a dull snap of wet metal meeting muscle. Breath left her in silence. No scream. Only the thud of knees hitting ground, followed by her side twisting unnaturally beneath the shaft that pinned her to the dust. Children didn't run. One froze. The other crawled forward, touching her shoulder as if confusion might reverse it. Laughter erupted. One of the raiders clapped his hands, delighted. Another grabbed a crate, tipped its contents into a sack. Meat tins. Solar wafers. No one looked at the bleeding. That part was done. She remained upright for a moment longer, arms still forming the shape of protection. Blood soaked through her clothes, slow at first, then eager. One child tried to lift her arm. It wouldn't rise. The launcher was reloaded, casually. No urgency. No second target. The children were too small to waste resources. From the far ridge, eyes narrowed behind fractured lenses. No movement. Just watching. Jaw tense. One hand rested on a rusted support post. Fingers flexed, then stilled. Still too far. Still too many. Still too soon. Back at the site, another scavenger tore open a lockbox with a chisel. Coins poured out. One of them shoved a medkit aside. Not valuable enough. The figure on the ground shifted once, barely. Her fingers curled slightly toward the girl's. A shallow gasp escaped but caught halfway. Chest rose once, fell again, didn't rise. A trail of red traced the slope beside her. The younger twin smeared her palm in it, confused. The older wrapped both arms around her middle, face pressed into her side. No one came. The raiders collected their prize and left without fanfare. No orders. No parting words. The vehicle turned slowly, back wheels dragging loose cable that whipped across the dirt. Dust followed. Within seconds, they were shadows swallowed by heat haze. Still, no doors opened. No one moved from their hiding places. The girls remained. The body remained. On the ridge, the figure finally exhaled through his teeth. Still didn't move. Eyes fixed on the two shapes curled around something no longer warm. Mouth tight. Shoulders unmoved. Yet breath came sharper now. A piece of broken fence swung loose on its hinge, creaking once before settling back against steel. Silence returned, heavy and permanent. Her breath rattled once beneath the metal shaft lodged below the ribs. Not enough to lift her chest, only enough to stir the edge of a torn scarf still clinging to her shoulder. Blood no longer spilled, it settled, thickened, turned dark. One child pressed her forehead against the woman's stomach, mumbling something between sobs and lullabies that had no tune. The other tore strips from her own tunic, hands trembling as she pushed them against the wound, unsure where to place pressure, unsure if pressure mattered anymore. The metal was hot. Her fingers pulled back with a hiss but returned again without pause. Footsteps scuffed nearby. Soft. Measured. Someone crossed the corridor, eyes darting toward the scene, then away. A plastic jug clinked against another, louder than it should have been. The figure adjusted grip, moved past faster. No words. No stop. A door creaked open across the lot. A figure stepped out, backlit by weak generator light, stared for a few seconds, hand resting on the doorframe. Mouth parted, as if to say something. Nothing came. Door eased shut. Lock slid back into place. Night pressed its weight into every surface. The light dimmed until even shadows lost their contrast. Wind stopped teasing. It just hung there, dense and metallic. Her legs had stopped twitching. The twins didn't notice. One lay flat now, small frame half on top of her mother's. Her arms wrapped tight, eyes fixed on the spear. No tears left. The other kept folding and refolding a bloodied cloth, trying to clean it against her own chest, staining herself further. The color didn't matter anymore. From the far ridge, a figure crouched. Elbows on knees. Head tilted forward. One hand pressed tight around a rail support. Knuckles pale beneath grime. Every breath came with a hiss. Not anger. Not sorrow. Just the sound a man makes when thinking too fast and moving too slow. His right boot shifted an inch. Loose rock tumbled down. Not far. Enough to make a sound. The smaller girl's head turned. Not toward him. Toward the noise. Hope flickered across her face, but only for a moment. Too dark. Nothing visible. Her hands returned to the blood. A cough from across the lane. Ragged. Not the woman's. Someone watching from another corner. They didn't step forward either. The figure near the ridge stood, slow. Body moved like metal under strain. A scar across the side of his throat caught the moonlight for a second before shadow swallowed it again. His hand touched the pistol grip inside his coat, not to draw, just a habit. Eyes locked on the bodies below. Breathing heavier now. Record said stay hidden. Orders said let the zone manage itself. Memory said no one helped his sister either. From somewhere deeper in the district, a dog howled once, cut off halfway through the note. No footsteps followed. No chase. Just that one cry, then silence again. The child with the soaked cloth finally dropped it. Her hands were raw. She pressed them both against the wound and leaned forward, as if sheer weight might close it. Her head dropped. No sound. No motion. Just stillness. That stillness did it. The figure moved. Not fast. Not loud. Just forward. Down the ridge. Across the gravel. One hand rested briefly on the steel railing as he passed the loading bay. A door creaked open somewhere behind him. He didn't stop. A piece of metal scraped under his boot. The girls didn't hear him coming. He crouched beside the body. His breath caught at the smell, burned flesh, copper, old smoke. He placed one hand on the taller child's shoulder. She didn't look up. Not at first. When she did, her mouth opened, but no words escaped. He didn't wait. He reached under her arms and pulled her back gently. She resisted once, then let go. The smaller one clung to her mother's arm. He pulled her too, carefully, gently, lifting her clear of the blood. No one shouted. No one followed. He slipped his arms beneath the woman's torso. Her body sagged in the middle. The spear still anchored her side. It scraped against his jacket as he lifted. Blood soaked into his shirt. He stood. Carried her. The girls followed close behind, barefoot. From windows above, eyes watched. Lights blinked off. Curtains drew shut. No one came. Not until one already had. Boots found purchase between cracks slick with coolant residue. A grunt escaped him as weight shifted across his shoulders, her limbs loose, head lolling back, blood soaking deeper into his collar. One of the girls stumbled over piping and clutched the hem of his jacket. He didn't stop. The entrance sat behind a rusted hatch half covered in fungus, the lockplate long shorted by corrosion. He ignored it. Instead, knelt beside the wall and peeled back a false panel. Dust poured from the opening. Beneath the grime, metal, smoother than anything above ground. His palm hovered over the embedded port, fingers twitching as he hesitated. He hadn't touched the chip in years. Code still burned against his skin as the panel lit orange, then blinked green. The hatch groaned, shifted. He pressed his shoulder to the frame and pushed. Inside, the air bit colder, laced with chemicals and forgotten things that once saved lives, now abandoned for being too expensive to matter. Lights flickered once along the low ceiling. Not enough to see clearly, just enough to move. She slipped slightly in his grip as he crossed into the vault. He caught her again, adjusted. The shaft still protruded from her side, wet and foreign. He laid her across a decayed medical slab, legs half dangling off the edge. One arm dropped limply to the floor. A station hummed to life after 3 tries. Old power cells protested, but lit. Expired kits lined the wall. He scanned labels. Most useless. One read, plasma sealant. Another, nerve buffer. Both outdated. He grabbed them anyway. The girls stood near the doorway, shivering. One rubbed her forearms with small fists. The other stared at the dark patch widening beneath her mother's hip. He cracked the seal on the buffer kit. Smell hit first. Burnt adhesive and old blood. Contents looked intact. Tube jammed, but he forced it open with a metal prong. No anesthesia. She twitched once as he gripped the spear. No scream. No breath. Just one violent jerk as metal left flesh. The smaller girl retched into her hands. The other turned her head. He worked quickly. Sealant hissed against the wound, bubbling against tissue that refused to close. Pressure bandage held barely. He adjusted airflow to the vent above and waited for her chest to rise again. Nothing. 30 seconds passed. 40. On the 52nd, her throat jumped. Not breath. A reflex. He pulled a blanket from the cabinet, tossed it over her. Sat back. Hands covered in blood. His, hers, theirs. Didn't matter anymore. He turned to the girls. One still stared at the floor. The other refused to blink. He reached for a meal pack. Ripped the corner open with his teeth and handed it to the taller one. She didn't move. He shoved it gently into her palm and turned back to the terminal. Pressure reading flatlined. Not death. Machine just couldn't register her physiology. He adjusted manually, rewired the input node using parts from a decantam scanner. The display jumped to life. Weak vitals. Breathing shallow. Heartbeat erratic. Still there. He took a breath through his teeth and exhaled without sound. The girls sat together on a crate, knees touching. One picked at a plastic tag on her sleeve. The other leaned against her shoulder, food untouched in her lap. Outside, no wind. No laughter. No footstep. Just the hum of coolant pipes dragging heat away from the core. Somewhere above, voices argued over ration lines. No one spoke of her. No one noticed he was missing. He checked the vault entrance again. Still locked. Reinforced seal held. No way to see inside. No way to hear what waited above. He placed a wrench beside the door. Heavy. Unbalanced. Better than empty hands. The woman's breathing caught again, shorter this time. His gaze dropped to the wound. Sealant already cracking along one edge. He pressed another layer in. From outside the vault, silence deepened. Scavenger kills didn't go ignored. Someone would return to finish it. Not for revenge. For habit. He glanced at the girls once more. One had fallen asleep with her head on the other's lap. The older watched him without blinking, arms tight around her sister. He didn't speak. He sat by the door. And waited. Static cracked through the pipe grid above the vault like a bone snapping under slow pressure. A voice followed, dry, broken by interference, thick with rusted humor. It didn't call for surrender. It didn't ask questions. Just named the man who carried her. Described the color of his coat. The cut of his boot tread. Mentioned the girls. Described how she had bled across the dirt like a spilt drink someone forgot to clean. The voice promised correction. Not revenge. Not justice. Just order. The girls didn't understand the language, but they understood tone. One covered her ears. The other watched the vault door like it might vanish if stared at long enough. He stood in the corner, back to the junction wall, hands dark with dried sealant. No weapons. No reinforcement. Just broken furniture, stripped circuitry, coils of wire peeled from a dead reactor spine. He moved fast. Muscle memory only. No plan. Not enough time. A broken service bot gave up its arm for a swinging hinge trap. He wedged it over the entrance, used torn cable as tension coil. Balanced a cracked medcrate on top, stuffed with nails and glass. Set it to drop if the vault seal cracked even an inch. Next, the corner vent. He jammed metal slats into its grating, bent the ends outward. If anyone tried to crawl in, they'd lose skin. If they forced it, they'd bleed out. Every few minutes, the voice returned. Different words, same promise. Descriptions got more specific. Whoever spoke had seen the inside. Probably someone who passed during the night. Probably someone who'd watched him carry her. She hadn't woken. Still breathing, but light. Shallow enough to worry. Her skin had turned pale under the sealant. He checked her pulse twice. Each time slower. He poured half a ration of purified water into the mouth of the older girl. She took it without question. Passed the cup to her sister. Both drank. Both stared. A second signal buzzed through the grid. This one sharper. Coordinates. A timer. 12-minute. He moved to the vent shaft at the rear of the vault. Too narrow to escape. Too high to reach. He stuffed its base with cloth, lit a corner, filled it with smoke. Not to suffocate, just to suggest the air system had failed. By uncertainty. By delay. 9-minute. He searched the cabinets again. No stims. No flash charge. Just binding mesh. He wrapped it around his forearm, layered twice. One more loop around his knuckles. 6 minutes. The girls huddled near the wall now. One leaned against the other, half asleep. Her legs twitched as if running in dream. He returned to the slab, pressed 2 fingers to the widow's throat. Still there. Faint. Outside engines stirred. Not one. Not two. More. Tires against broken gravel. Radio clicked. Boots grinding ash. 3 minutes. He checked the hinge trap. Tight. Set. Tore apart the bottom drawer of the medstation, found a jagged panel edge, still coated in copper. Sharp enough to slash. He took it. Weighed it in his hand. Not enough. He picked up a support rod from the floor. Heavy. Weld burn along one side. Good for 1 swing, maybe 2. He jammed it behind the doorframe and stepped back. Lights in the vault dimmed. One of the girls whimpered. The voice returned. No longer amused. Just quiet. A countdown began. 10. He gripped the rod. 9. Stepped in front of the girls. Watched the seal on the vault door shift. 7. No breath. 6. No tremble. 5. He didn't blink. 4. Behind him, her chest rose once. 3. She exhaled. 2. The door hissed. 1. The vault door gave a groan that scraped down the spine like metal dragged across wet bone. The latch released in increments, slower than expected, enough to betray hesitation. No entry yet, just pressure. A moment of listening. A test. He didn't wait. Steel rod in hand, he pressed his weight to the side wall, eyes fixed on the top hinge. The trap hung by a single bent screw, balance exact, tension cable stretched taut. Dust shifted beneath his boot. Sweat clung under his collar. The final lock disengaged. A hiss bled into silence. The door creaked open 3 inches. A hand reached through, Bare, calloused, tattooed from wrist to nail. Weight pulled on the hinge. The crate dropped. Nails tore through canvas. Shards of old glass exploded into the entryway. A scream broke the hush like torn paper. Another shape lunged to grab the first, but too late. Both tumbled back, their limbs tangled, boots scraping concrete. He didn't wait. One step, two, and he was out of the vault. The hallway yawned wider beyond the blast zone. 5 stood waiting. Helmets mismatched. Armor made from stove lids and welding plate. One lifted a pipe rifle. Another held a hooked blade with a sensor coil taped to the hilt. They didn't expect speed. They didn't expect him to charge. He didn't shout. He struck the nearest in the hip with the rod, dropped low, swept behind the second. Grabbed the rifle by the barrel and pulled hard. It fired into the wall, igniting a storage sealant pack that sprayed foam across the ceiling. Heat surged through the corridor. He let go of the weapon, kicked the attacker in the knee, spun into the next. Fist met helmet. Pain surged up his wrist. Useless. He ducked a blade. The edge clipped his ear. Warmth spilled down his neck. He didn't stop moving. Footsteps pounded from outside. More coming. He turned, ran. Back past the vault. Past the sealed medroom. Into the maintenance corridor where shadows clung tight against the wall. He stopped only when breath refused to come without fire. Behind him, shouts. 2 wounded. 3 chasing. He grabbed a loose conduit pipe from the ground, swung blindly behind him to slow pursuit, ducked into the filtration wing. Filters long dead. Vents open. He climbed fast, scraped his knee raw, left blood behind on the rim. Up into the access shaft. Down into coolant exchange. Circle. Confuse. Waste their time. They followed with curses and gunmetal. One slipped on his blood. Another triggered a tripwire across the stairs. Panel swung down, caught him in the temple. He folded. One remained. She had no armor. Just a chain wrapped around both hands. They fought under a leaking pipe, steam clouding everything. Her chain caught his leg. He dropped to one knee. She raised both arms to swing again. He jabbed upward with the broken rod. Caught her ribs. She gasped once. He hit again. Harder. She fell back. He didn't watch her land. Back to the vault. The girls still sat in the corner. Wide-eyed. One held a rusted spoon like a weapon. The other held her breath. He leaned against the wall. Blood soaked his shirt. He dropped the rod. Inside the medchamber, the woman stirred. Her fingers twitched. Eyes opened halfway. She blinked against the light. Her head turned. She saw him. Slouched, shirt torn, jaw swollen, boots tracking crimson across the floor. One hand pressed to his side. She looked past him to the girls. One noticed her gaze. Crawled forward. Laid her palm on the blanket near her mother's hand. The woman tried to speak. Nothing came. He didn't look at her. Just sat there, breathing hard, eyes fixed on the door. Waiting again. Rain came 5 days late. Thin lines, barely more than mist, but enough to loosen ash from the roofs and draw rivulets down rusted bulkheads. Children stepped barefoot into the runoffs, not to play, just to feel something cleaner than what came before. Inside the vault, silence pressed heavier than air. The girls moved carefully, as if the wrong sound might wake something best left sleeping. The woman had spoken once, 2 words, maybe 3, before falling back into herself. Her wounds closed unevenly. One eye stayed half-lidded. Still breathing, though. Still warm. He hadn't returned since the morning after. No boot prints outside the hatch. No dishes moved. No scent of smoke from his usual corner. One girl checked the passage where he slept. Found a shirt, torn and stiff with dried blood, folded beside a piece of copper shaped into a child's bracelet. Too wide for either of their wrists. She didn't take it. Word drifted through the camp. Some said the clan left a warning behind, 3 helmets hanging from an old comm tower with scorch marks still fresh beneath them. Others swore he traded safe passage for silence. One voice claimed he was captured again, taken past the quarry, where the air never moved. No proof. Just breath and fear pretending to be fact. She sat up on the 7th morning. Bones rigid under thin skin, back curved like it had forgotten how to straighten. She didn't speak. Just reached for the twins, pulled them into her, held without sound. Later, someone brought food to the vault. A girl with wire in her hair and a scar down her lip. She left it by the entrance, knocked once, walked off. Others followed. Not every day. Not always food. Sometimes just scraps. Sometimes nothing. Still, they came. No one tried to open the door. No one tried to claim her. No one spoke his name. That part didn't belong to the camp. Some say he returned once. Hood pulled low, hands unbandaged, a slight limp in the right leg. Bought 3 canisters of heat gel and a replacement breathing mask. Gave no ID. Asked no questions. Paid in coils of wire too pure to be scrap. Left without speaking. Not confirmed. Could have been someone else. People lie when silence starts to itch. The vault never reopened. The clan never returned. A boy from the west side carved a symbol into the gate, 2 lines crossing over a downward stroke. No one painted over it. No one removed it. Children whispered the story at night, low and fast, as if telling it too loud might make it untrue. They spoke of the spear, of the blood, of the man with no armor and nothing to trade but breath and time. They argued over what he looked like, how tall he stood, whether he spoke alien languages or none at all. Most of them didn't know what he said. Didn't matter. What they remembered was movement. A body lifted from the dirt. A door opened when every other closed. Not for credit. Not for law. Just because no one else did.